Hello again to another webinar from Searchmetrics about SEO. This time we're going to speak about the search landscapes in global markets, so it's about international SEO. My name is Markus Penzig. I'm the Chief SEO Consultant of Searchmetrics, of the DSG from Searchmetrics, and with me is Chloe Fair from Impression. Hi, Chloe.
Hi, Markus. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. I'm really excited talking about this topic.
Yeah, definitely. Me too.
Okay, so if you want, we can start.
Perfect. Cool. So, yes, so as Markus said, I'm going to talk about search landscapes in global markets. Quite a broad title, I guess, and it could mean anything. So I'm going to go through a few key points today. So the first thing I want to talk about is I'll give some introductions and discuss some challenges that I've experienced in my day-to-day role, which has made me feel like this is probably a good thing to talk about. I'm then going to give a case study of SEO and global search strategies, so something that I experienced quite a lot, having worked with a lot of different clients. I'm then going to run through 4 tips to maintaining this presence. Hopefully this will be quite practical tips, depending on whether you are an SEO yourself, a marketing manager, anything like that, there should be something for everyone. And then I'll end with a quick summary, moving on to some questions with Markus as well. So objectives for today, I'm hoping that you'll be able to kind of have these 3 key takeaways. One being the importance of considering search landscape. So bit of a buzzword, but basically understanding what you're getting stuck into before you enter a new market. And that's what I'm hoping you're going to start thinking about a bit holistically. Also about how search features and intent can vary in different markets, which again is quite a broad topic, but I've got a couple of examples to show the differences. And then finally, how to think search landscape and SEO when considering entering new markets. So if you're not even a digital marketer, but you are a business owner or in kind of sales and development, then hopefully there'll be something for you as well. Great, so a quick introduction to me. So as Markus mentioned, I work at Impression, a digital marketing agency. We are based in Nottingham. Well, we're remote at the minute, but we are based in Nottingham. And I've been at Impression for over 4 years now. But I started off in an international travel company in Germany. I worked in Munich, where I learned SEO in German, which was interesting.
So actually, we can speak German now, right?
I would rather not. This is why I've kept this a secret.
This webinar in English anyway, so let's keep on speaking.
So I learned, but the great thing about that was that basically I experienced being the first kind of native English speaker in a German company that wanted to enter the UK market. So I've experienced firsthand the challenges, the barriers and the successes of that, where, you know, kind of the company language switched to English while I was there, and there was a lot of things going on. So I've seen that firsthand. I now head up our international offering at Impression, so I'm a senior strategist here, and I account manage our largest global accounts, where I work with senior SEOs, with digital marketing managers, with CMOs, to aid their kind of global search strategies. So although I am an SEO specialist, definitely through and through, I kind of think about things a bit more holistically, which is what you'll kind of hopefully get from this talk. So some challenges to start off with then. So these 3 key areas are 3 things I work on a daily basis, which consider the search landscape more than I initially thought. So pitching to global prospects, reporting on performance, and succeeding with global strategies. I do all these 3 things every day, but the most important thing is that the underlying tone of each of these different topics is that I need to think holistically. I need to think search. I find as SEOs we can get lost in the intricacies of technical SEO, especially with international, whereas I take a step back and I look at the search landscape. One thing I have learned from pitching to numerous global prospects and kind of working with them is that every business is obviously different, but there are a lot of key themes. A lot of the key themes that I find is that business owners and CMOs won't understand their search competitors. So the competitors that they're competing with in the search. And that's something that I kind of have learned over the past few years. So I wanted to just highlight some quotes, some conversations that I've had, and these might maybe sound familiar to some people, and I've genuinely had these word for word as well. So can we have this yesterday in every language? That's obviously an SEO's worst nightmare. Really not kind of the quality that I would want, and it's often, you know, something that's got to be rushed. And then the kind of second one just below that is probably my favourite, the one that I get the most and the one that I've constructed quite a good reply to. So can you do what we've done in this country? So say, can you do what we've done in Germany in the UK through SEO? Immediately with that, the first question I'll ask is, well, have you achieved everything you've achieved in Germany through just SEO? No, you haven't. And that's where I think a lot of the time, even though obviously it's keeping us in a job as SEOs, a lot of strategies can be focused purely on SEO because it's worked for another market. But there's so many other things that have to be considered. And then the one on the right is something that I'm going to briefly touch upon and not go off on a tangent, is about English domains cannibalizing with each other. Another common challenge that I have is where a UK team who, you know, have a lot of budget to invest in SEO and want to, but the kind of head office or the HQ or the corporate domain is in the US, is American, and that digital marketing manager doesn't speak to the US digital marketing manager. And this is another challenge that I've often been faced with as well. So what I'm going to kind of run through is now just quite quickly a common approach to market entry. And this is just a bit of a story of something that I've experienced quite a few times. And then it's going to kind of go into the 4 tips, which hopefully you can take away and understand how it can aid, not kind of, I guess, failing with your new market entry or your growth in your new or in a current market, for example. So a bit of a situation analysis. So we've got a company, say they're based in Germany. They've been based in Germany forever. They're maybe 6-7 years old. This company has an all kind of German speaking team, has a few offices in Germany, and they've grown really, really well. They have example.com/de, so I'm just talking about subfolder for this particular case, but obviously it would work the same if it was also example.de anyway, so it's just kind of an example. So how did they get to where they are today? Well, they've understood the current market. It's not going to have started with just, let's do SEO, let's look at search landscape. There's a lot of development, a lot of information already in there. The majority of the business is speaking and working in the original language. So even though, and we can all probably, I guess, agree, anyone in marketing, that resource is often an issue, and that means then you've got everyone in the company speaking that language. So you can use, you know, an executive or an intern to write some content quickly if you need it. They've explored all key competitors in the original language. They've been aware of it, because at the end of the day, the business owners are going to have created that business for a reason. Is that because they know the competitors already? Is that because they came from a competitor? There's going to be a reason. And then finally, they've made changes over the months and over the years, which have just come from, say, a bit more like anecdotal feedback. So even though it is based on some evidence, it's also just been a conversation or something a few people have noticed. Again, speaking in a target language. So the goal of this particular business is to, say, enter 3 new markets. They found these are their growth markets. They want to enter these new markets. So they decide we need a website, we need, you know, teams, we want to grow. We've got these 3 things that we've now looked at. Growth, we know how we want to grow, we know what we want to grow, we know the figures, the targets, always kind of, that's the first thing that I often hear. We've got content, and that can mean anything. I've seen from PDFs in the target language to PDFs in the original language to videos to anything, to, you know, written copy, press releases. They've got some form of content. And then they've got budgets. So they've worked out some margins and some kind of targets based on the growth targets. So this is the three things that they kind of have in place. So the question is that particular business ready to dominate the search? They inquire to hire an SEO in-house, or they inquire to outsource to an SEO agency. And then you ask the question, well, I always say to the client or the stakeholder, do you understand the search in your new market? Do you understand what you're actually competing with in that new market? You've smashed Germany, you've done a great job, but do you understand Italy and Sweden, etc.? If the answer is no, that's very honest, and that's great. That's a good answer to have. That then means, okay, well, we need to get stuck into some search analysis. We need to get stuck into tools and crawls and understanding what's going on and have some conversations. So that's kind of easily a red. That's okay, no, let's get started. If they say yes, they'll often say, yes, we know our competitors. And I've had this before where a client has actually told me their competitors and they haven't had sites in the language of the market they want to grow in. So they're a German competitor with an English site, fine, but then don't have presence in the UK. Maybe it's like a US site, and they just assume that there is that presence there. So even if a client says that, I would always be inclined to say, no, you need to look at search analysis. That's why I do a lot of pitching, I guess. So you need SEO, you need this analysis, you need us to look at the SERPs. So there are some core considerations that I think anybody can take into play that's in a digital role or in a marketing role. If you're an SEO, even better, you're probably going to understand a bit of this already, but hopefully this is a different perspective which I've kind of been working with over the past couple of years. So number one, understand user intent in each market. So we start with keyword research and analysis, that's no secret. And the way that I do this and the way that I think it's a good place to start is to not look at volumes at first. The worst thing I think, this is obviously again a little bit time dependent, but again, this can often be when you're planning a strategy. This is before you promise any deliverables. This is when you're getting a strategy together and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to find things out before actually telling you we're going to achieve these growth targets. So you gather internal terms, and by internal terms, I mean the terms that your business or your client talk about internally. So, we have that in search marketing. We'll say different things. We'll say PPC, paid media, SEA, SEO. There's all these different kind of jargony terms which vary. This is why I was a little bit confused when I started kind of SEO in the UK, because it was called SEM when I worked in Germany, and then I was looking for SEO jobs, and it's, things are interpreted completely differently. So you gather internal terms in the target language. It can often be that this hasn't happened yet. So say for the example I've given, the German company, maybe they haven't got any documents in English yet. This is when you do need to really think about getting a native to start gathering these internal terms, someone that's arguably closer to the business than to SEO, just so you can get the jargon and the terms together. The second point, have a conversation with the client in the target language if possible, but it doesn't have to be in the target language. You can just have translations. I do this all the time. I'm currently working to develop a Czech site that's going to have Czech, French and German, and I'm talking to the client about Czech keywords, and he's Czech and I'm English, and we're getting through it, and it's fine. And that's the type of thing really that you have to do, because I want to look at it from every language holistically. I don't just want to bring in a different SEO for each language, because I have an idea of the global search strategy. And then finally, you start getting your volumes and you start understanding keywords and how topics are being interpreted. So I've used an example here, home gym equipment. I've used this example because it's a client that I've worked with anyway who sell home gym equipment. But not only that, but this is a perfect example of how things can change a lot as we are all in the same situation where we've all been at home for a lot longer than we'd like. This type of thing has increased massively. So once you've identified some primary keywords, so I've got one of my primary seed hero terms, home gym equipment, I'm then going to start asking myself some questions. And these are the three questions that I often ask. So the first one would be, what is the coverage of the topic in the news? Bit of a sidestep. Why am I talking about the news? Well, actually, I often find if you're just looking at search competitors, it can be a bit misleading. At this point, I want to understand how that term, how that topic, the main topic of home gym equipment, is being covered, is being interpreted, is being seen, who's talking about it, what are some of the key things that I've noticed. So I draw out some key insights. Okay, well, it's a trending topic. Fine. It's thousands of pieces of coverage weekly. I can easily scrape how many pieces of coverage using kind of scraper tools that have been weekly. And I also see it's closely linked to weight loss. So I'm looking through and there's loads and loads of articles about weight loss. So then the next question I would ask was, does this give any suggestions on the maturity of the market? And by maturity of the market, I mean, if I'm a German company and I want to then bring my home gym equipment to the UK, am I present in kind of the UK? Is this a trending topic? Is this something that I, know that the users already know or interested in or not? So with that, I kind of get some more takeaways. Well, yes, there's high demand. There's multiple brands. There's publication displaying the best value products. And there's news validation, so from really reliable sources that this is actually a trend. So at this point, I then have starting to get some valid information to speak to my client. Number 3, so what does this tell me about a typical user and their intent in the market? So what can I draw insights? And yes, we are stereotyping. However, we are looking at news coverage. We're looking at things that have had thousands of views. We're looking at things that have really, really got a lot of traction. Well, there's recent trends, so we know that maybe the users are quite new, but because there's been such a big boom, maybe they're quite informed as well. There's a lot of idea and inspiration articles related to the home gym equipment term, like best home gym equipment for your garage, small gyms, etc. And it's also competitive and high demand. So at this point, I've got an idea, if I'm doing this for each market, I've got an idea in each market exactly what this kind of is looking like in the news. And I can get some insights from people that are writing about it quite often. So that's the first point of understanding user intent, starting to get in touch with the user a bit more. We get lost in spreadsheets a lot as SEOs, and sometimes you just need to have a look at what is out there. So that kind of ties me on to the second point quite nicely of understanding SERP features per market. So by this, I mean understanding SERP features for your primary hero terms and for your topics. So we all know kind of what and how and why are going to bring more PAA boxes, featured snippets, informational things like that. But think broader than that. Think images, videos, shopping, think of ads distribution. Start thinking about what that looks like. If you've had a really fortunate run in your business in Germany or in the UK and then you're trying to enter Italy, but actually in Italy there's 10% more ads, then you need to obviously start being informed. That's where being more holistic is really benefit. So the important thing here, and this is the way I approach it, is kind of gaining an understanding of the SERPs as a whole, looking kind of deeper into SERP features. Not only this, if I haven't done the market research or kind of SERP research for a while, I will go so deep into tools like Searchmetrics and I will read and kind of look on all of the SEO publications to see if there have been any changes recently that I can then present to a client and integrate within my strategy. And then kind of the third point and another key takeaway, look at giants for specific SERP features in each market. So we've got for obviously transactional, we've got sites like Amazon and eBay, etc. But for things like informational terms, there are giants for each industry. So for example, for kind of health and fitness and well-being, we've got Healthline who dominate. We've got all these different types of sites. Do you have a site like that in your target market that you want to grow in that you don't have in your current market? So that's when we would look at things like world rankings. And this is a great kind of way, as I've kind of spoken to Marcus about, a great kind of way of checking after an algorithm change has happened or after, notice some fluctuation, or if you're in an agency and you're fortunate enough to have kind of a big portfolio of clients and you notice a bit of difference, you can look at this type of data and you can see what the winners and what the losers are. Where's the change come from? given, you know, there is kind of a lot of volatility, but I really think you can start looking at these and taking some good snapshots for your target market. So looking at sites like, you know, YouTube, Twitter, obviously, it was all in the news that kind of Twitter feeds were taken out of the SERPs. There's always news about YouTube gaining and losing and all types of things like that. Look at it for your market. Yes, it's obviously going to be, you know, not a completely accurate data, but at least having an understanding of the glaring things. You don't want to start a search strategy which is based on longer tail guides if all of a sudden you realize in that landscape there's a lot of videos. That's the type of thing you want to think about. So then we would start comparing. So for this, I've just chosen two different English-speaking markets to show you. So we start having a look at the UK first, have a look at the weighting of that. What does that look like? What's the percentage of each SERP feature? And again, this is obviously general. This isn't for one of the core keywords. I would then compare. So for the sake of this, I've compared with Australia because I've noticed there is quite a lot of differences in the Australian SERPs when I've done some research. There's a few things that you can see initially there is generally more knowledge panels, there's more kind of featured snippets, and there's more desktop mobile differentiation as well. So having a look at this, getting some takeaways, just starting to have a look, researching markets, and you can do this and you can really get a good understanding. So some general things that I understand is that the SERP features are generally in the same order. So we've not got anything too glaring here. There's nothing too drastic. There's nothing that's going to completely change things up. But there are some good takeaways in terms of some percentage wins. So 7% more ads in the UK than in Australia. So that is, again, for the whole of the SERPs. That could mean a lot of things. That could mean, well, there's more searches or anything. But you can then get deeper by looking at your primary terms, by looking at your keywords and looking at SERP features there. There's more featured snippets, quite a lot more featured snippets, 5%, which is, in the grand scheme of things, is quite a lot. But then looking at knowledge panel, there's also a bigger gap there. So there's 14% more in Australia than in the UK. And then looking at mobile and kind of desktop trends, that's another really kind of important thing as well. That says a lot about a person, especially if you're in B2B, for example, but actually there's still a really high mobile share. You should still be considering mobile or not. It's one of my bugbearers that I just think, and I know that as SEOs, we still just look at desktops all the time. And maybe that's not everybody, but it's definitely something that you should think about more, especially with international market entry. So this then brings me some key takeaways. So quickly, I would then put these into my kind of conversations with clients and then my strategies. When I check this quite often, I will then just let clients know in, you know, like status calls, in bi-weekly calls, and just say, oh, there is a bit of a change in the SERPs. I've noticed this, or I've noticed this site's decreased. I've noticed this site's increased. So things like importance of layered content strategies. We all know it's important, but this really reiterates it when you've got such a wide range of SERP features. Importance of cross-channel integration as well, with there being more ads. If I was kind of, you know, an Australian business entering the UK market and I saw a high percentage of more ads, even as an SEO, I would want to speak to that paid media person if they've, you know, done ads already a little bit and figure out, okay, what can we learn? What have you found? Why is this higher? And then kind of understanding the giants. This is, again, the point I mentioned earlier. Understanding giants and informational hubs is so important. Obviously, we've got Wikipedia, but there are so many other ones per industry. You know, it varies in every industry. For example, for renewable energy, you've got specific renewable energy publications that literally dominate the SERPs. They have definition pages for everything. Same with things like sports and home fitness and things like that. You've got certain publications like women's health, men's health that just dominate for these types of terms. So then the final one is the mobile opportunity. So this is really important because I think this is where like audience and persona analysis is key. Understanding what your users like. If you're working with a branding team that's based their branding on audience research or persona research, amazing. Get stuck into that and figure out some of the different characteristics of your user. Are they particularly busy? What part of the country do they live in? Are they older? Are they younger? Are they single? Are they married? These types of things which allow us to get a picture of interests and allow us to tailor our content. So then kind of as a third point, so understanding the performance and interpretation of keywords. So this point here, I've taken diets. I've just taken diets as a hero term. It was just something I was just thinking about maybe. And I just thought, and as well, because with diets, it can be quite saturated in search, and I know it varies per market. Topics like this, where there are like restrictions with, government restrictions, and there's restrictions with healthcare and things. This is really interesting because they're the type of search competitors. That's the type of information in your target market landscape that you want to know. Is, what is the equivalent of the NHS site in different markets? What is the equivalent of that? Because really, you should not base a global search strategy on the NHS site. Say if you're, trying to target some terms, they have like loads of kind of longer tail guides and blogs on there and things like that, and informational content. You really want to look at the equivalent of that in your target market, because the content might be different. It might be a completely different situation to deal with. So immediately you're looking at volumes. You're looking at kind of different categories. You're categorizing your keywords. You're then filtering through your keywords. And you're looking at these big volumes, which are obviously really, really high. So then we're trying to look at some differences. So what I've done here is I've just looked at, and there's not loads of takeaways here, but again, it's just a method. It's just a way to think a little bit more. I've looked at the US, for example, and then I've looked at the UK. So we've got a higher volume. That doesn't necessarily, suggest, it might just be that there's actually the same amount of searches per person, there's just more people, but it still definitely shows that it's an important term. You would then have a look at things like seasonality. Have a look at, okay, is the seasonality different? Does it vary? Especially for obviously seasonal clients, it's really important. Our winter is completely, in the UK, is completely different to a winter in Australia. It's different months. You've got to consider that seasonality, those trends. And it might sound really straightforward, but if you don't live in the country and you don't work with anyone who lives in the country, you might forget these types of things. And it's important just to think about it when you're developing your search strategy. So then we look at the UK. So again, we've got actually a bit of arguably a little bit of a higher increase in seasonality here, which is really interesting and something to definitely look into. We then kind of look at maybe the top 3 results and look at the questions as well. So you can see you've got the US news site, which does dominate for these types of terms anyway, and for a lot of hero terms. And then in the UK, you've got the NHS site. So this is what I'm saying, like, you need to look at these 2 sites separately. Don't analyze the NHS site and then use that in your US strategy. It might aid it, and it might be kind of a quick way if you're tight on resource, but ultimately it's not foolproof. And we want to start as we mean to go on. Doing this research in the beginning is only going to put you in a good position in the long run, as we know as SEOs, of course. So then we've got search volume differences and CPC. I've worked in some industries where there is literally 0 volume in another market, in trying everything, trying target language, English language, everything. And that is something that's quite, I find quite common in like software development, in like SaaS and things like that, where it's something that hasn't just entered that market yet. And you want to make sure that you know the volumes first. So comparing and contrasting is also good. CPC, just looking at the popularity, the demand, what kind of is it? Where are we at here? But again, the most valuable thing here would be to speak to a PPC who works in that, for your client or in your business. Really important to understand if they have any insights on, intent from queries, etc. So then finally, moving on to user behavior differences per market. And this is again something that isn't necessarily in the SEO job description, because it's kind of taking the way I'm going to talk about it now, and with the key points, it's taking a few steps away. However, it's all coming back to that end shared goal. And ultimately, it means that you're going to, basically cheating, you're going to get insights from other teams without even realizing it. And it's so useful. So key differences to look for. So a couple of things that I've highlighted here. So I've gone for general and I split a couple into B2C and B2B as well. So we've got, as I mentioned, device. So when you're thinking about user behavior, what is the device split in each country? Desktop, mobile, tablet. What does that say about the users? What is that kind of percentage? General, so how much, as well, another general point, how much paid features dominate the search per market? Really important one as well. It's important to know with search strategies. For B2C specifically, this is one that I've used a lot over the past kind of couple of years, and especially during kind of lockdown, when we've, you know, all experienced lockdown restrictions. And if anyone here works for a home and garden company or has a client, you'll know that there's been a demand boom, but actually this can be difficult when there's stock challenges. So it's understanding consumer shopping behavior, understanding, okay, well, in France, you know, typically in this industry, there are a lot of people that will buy this product in the store. I've had this specifically for Germany, where when there's products that are, say, over, you know, 200-300 euros, it's likely that we will need a form. We'll need a lead gen form on the site as well as an option, because there'll be more questions, whereas in some markets that's not the case. So it's thinking about that. And then finally, B2B, seasonality of tax and business year. So this is just, again, understanding, you know, typically in your industry, if you can, especially if you're B2B, what is that like in your target market? Is it April to April? Is it December till December? And this is particularly important for things like digital PR and link acquisition, where you're going to get features, but try and do it in the right time of the year and focus on that. It just needs to be understanding the typical kind of, you know, calendar for your target markets. And that might not even be drastic, but if you're working in 10, 11, 12, and you're a global kind of strategist or a global marketer, it's really easy just to let a couple of things slip. So I've just used an example of search in China. So I've not spoken about search engines much, which might seem a bit weird because I'm doing an international SEO talk. However, I want to talk about understanding markets more than search engines at this stage, because this is another talk in itself for each search engine. So if we use China as an example, the one thing I want to draw your attention to as well is, obviously, as most of us are likely to know as SEOs, that Google is not the main search engine. But not only that, but look at the kind of mobile desktop percentage. 61% mobile, 38% desktop. And if I compare that to, say, Denmark, we've got 33% mobile and 63% desktop. So it's actually flipped the other way around. Now, this is really interesting because, you know, you can speak to people that are kind of Danish and people that are Chinese and ask them generally. You can get some anecdotal feedback, but you can see this hard evidence. And this data here is from StatCounter, which has all of the different search data around the world, which is, of course, again, a pinch of salt, but it's really, really good to have a look at and to get some takeaways. So look at desktop, look at mobile, look at tablet, but then think broader than that. So these are different things as well that change search strategies. And we all, when I first kind of started thinking about this talk and this topic, these ideas, it was before the pandemic, and actually now this is more important than ever, because managing different markets now in search is more challenging than ever, but also better than ever, because there's such high demand in places, but it fluctuates so much. So understand economy a bit more. Understand who you're going to target with your product, with your service. Political campaigns, understand big distractions, you know, anything actually, not just political, news, trends, I mean, all different types of things, anything that's going on. Seasonality, I've mentioned, the Australia kind of winter example is something that I've experienced firsthand when I've worked with a client, and they just, you know, it's things like that. If you're a UK business, you're a French-German business and you have your seasons, it's making sure you're really in tune with everything else. And then digital maturity as well. What is search marketing like in that country? If it's a new country, say you're a digital marketing manager, you've worked on a UK business, they now want to start entering the German market or the French market. What is digital maturity like in those companies, in those countries, sorry? And thinking about it in that way is really, really important. So some key takeaways then. So I've kind of ran through the importance of search landscape for each of your chosen markets. I've shown how that can vary. Search features, intent can vary, things can change, behavior can be different. And even though it's not completely accurate, you can stereotype and get some good generalizations, which can aid your broad strategies. Because let's face it, an SEO strategy changes a lot. So if you're putting forward a 6-12-month strategy, you know, I like to work in quarters, but if it is 6 or 12 months, then you need to consider the bigger picture. And then how to think search landscape and SEO first. So just thinking, bringing it back down to keywords and volumes as well, but having conversations, that's so important. If you are, you know, speak more than one language, if you're multilingual, then yes, speak to different people in target languages in your business to understand those internal terms and do the research. If not, outsource, get natives involved, get specialists involved, and actually understand it to get that best potential for your client or your business. Thank you. So I've ran through that kind of quite a lot of takeaways there, losing my voice. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, take a sip of water. Yeah, it was. Thank you very much. And actually, we have got a couple of questions here. And I'm really excited to hear your opinion about these. So if you have got an English website already, yeah, let's say it's a UK website, and the company now decides that they want to enter the US or the Australian market. Can they not just take all the content and copy it to the different domains? I mean, the content is there already. Why make such a fuss if they have everything and just need to copy and paste?
So, the copy and paste question, that's a good one. So instead of just saying no straight away, what I'm going to say is the most important thing is, well, I think in that case, it makes a big difference in the beginning if you've got a .com or a .co.uk. So if you are, you know, kind of taking the subfolder approach or not, that's a big consideration. If you've got a .com and it's just generally EN, or maybe there's no tags in place, maybe it's just an EN site, then definitely looking at the performance in those EN markets first is going to be key. Because accidentally ranking, as I'm sure a lot of people have experienced, is a massive thing. And you get traffic from even kind of non-EN markets with your EN site. For example, the Netherlands is a good example where search results in the Netherlands are in English a lot, even for Dutch terms a lot of the time. So actually it's understanding, okay, I've got a .com site, it's in English, how is that currently performing? Ultimately, if you've got, you know, ENUS and ENAU and ENGB sites, and you've got .co.uk sites, what I believe Google and search engines are looking for is just directives. So if you're just then trying to use your UK site that's got natural coverage, got a lot of stuff in the UK, to then enter these markets without any kind of, you know, link acquisition or wider content or longer tail strategy, I think you're going to hit a wall. Yes, it could work for a certain amount of time, and you could just use your .com and you could, you know, get it to link everywhere, like get links in every market. But ultimately, you do need to think about that separate kind of country code targeting.
I'm confident that you answered the question.
Okay.
Maybe just give it another try here, or let me give another answer here.
Okay, cool.
When you're just copying and pasting to a very new website, then this new website is going to be extremely weak, and you're building up your own cannibalization issues. So even entering the new Australian market with this new domain, with the content that you have in UK already, it's very likely that you will rank with the UK website and not with the Australian, because it simply is stronger in this place. And here comes another question that goes into a little same direction. How important is hreflang in this kind of situation?
So, especially to conquer cannibalization, I'd say AHO Lang is key to conquer cannibalization particularly, and really, really key, especially when you do have a global EN site, which doesn't really have a particular focus. So you've got a .com EN site, well, that's just ranking everywhere accidentally, and then you're investing in SEO. So for that, that's why I think X default is key. Having specific targeting is so key, and making sure that you've got that across each site. It's the same with things like, I've experienced it with Germany and Austria, for example, and struggling for my previous company that I worked at in-house, we struggled to rank as well in Austria, because the nature was obviously travel companies, they had an AT site. That was what they had. They had a specific site, whether that was a subfolder or a domain, they had it, and it didn't have we weren't sending the right directive. So again, you can accidentally rank, but yeah, I believe that it really is key. But again, it's just one piece of the puzzle. And what I actually find is that now clients and digital marketing managers in-house will look at the AHO Langs and be like, yes, something needs to be fixed, but we fixed it and it's still not working. So actually, well, is it fixed? Is it all in place? Is everything working right? Is it completely flawless? But as a minimum, yeah, do you have them? I would always say that's really important to rank in each market, again, to avoid cannibalization.
Yeah, I think what many online marketers get wrong is that the hreflang does not transfer authority to the other website. It only helps to not rank the Australian website in UK and the other way around.
Yeah, exactly that.
Okay, that's an interesting one. What do you think about automatic translation? I mean, this is just an easy to go away.
Automatic translation is it's again another bugbear, I guess, because we are now, as SEOs, we are trying so hard to optimize for a user in a search engine. Like, it used to be, I was keyword stuffing when I first started SEO, and it worked. It really worked. And then it stopped working, which we all probably remember literally the day it stopped working with, things like that. So it's really important. Absolutely. It's kind of important to just think of the user now. And really, if someone is reading it, I don't like to talk about EAT too much, because I think it's something that we have unknowingly been talking about for years anyway. It just became maybe, a bit more of a trending topic in the past 12 months or so. But if someone is reading your site and you sound like a robot, not saying that automatic translations all do, but generally, even as someone that can speak a bit of German, if I write in German and try my hardest, it's not going to sound as good as you writing in German. It's not going to. So how can a translator or an automated translation do that? I also think you're at risk of cannibalizing again with translated content. If things aren't in place properly, you can just literally be copying and pasting. And I also don't believe it's ever flawless. The amount of times I see, blocks of the original target language because of the way CMSs pull in, and you all of a sudden see a paragraph of German on an English page, and it's going to scare users away, especially for e-commerce. And that kind of classifies, I think, as well with automated translation. Another thing that I guess is automated is often like pounds, euros, the position of the pound, the position of the euro, having it before or after, depending on the country. And that, again, is something that will just, I know that my parents wouldn't trust a website. Like, they would not trust a website if they saw euro on it, because they would think, oh, it's not kind of, it's not in the UK, it's going to cost me a lot of money for delivery, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of my answer there, if you agree.
Yeah, I'm absolutely with you on this part. It's all goes about user signals, and if people are trusting the website, if they like it or not, if they're bouncing. And I think there's a big discussion out there right now about user signals again, and Google's denying that they take them into evaluation. I still believe user signals are a big thing, and you should really look into this. How does culture change the international strategy? Is there anything that you need to look at, especially when it comes to culture?
So I guess things like, especially for things like overall strategies, if you're thinking about typical working weeks, and thinking about, if you're talking about B2B specifically as well, thinking about, things like that, like working weeks, is really important to consider, especially with things like paid, like timing ads right, things like that. But also generally just understanding, there's loads of typical anecdotal things, I guess, that I've spotted. And one prime example would be holidays, and travel. So, the idea of like a weekend away, that's actually not that popular in some markets. And that's something that, like in Denmark, for example, it's very, very common to just book like a specific, and I know this because I work with Danish clients where they all have a month off in like July or whatever, whereas my UK clients will take long weekends. And, things like that, like culture and I guess interests, and all kind of will, I guess, automatically, unintentionally aid your search strategy. So when you're doing keyword research, and I think that's really important with making sure that you have someone that has lived in the country or is native or understands the country to do that research, because I'll just search for things, say one of my interests, say if, going to the gym is an interest, I will just search for things that I may be interested in, and then in my keyword research I'll embed that in as well. And that's just my understanding of it, whereas it could be completely different in other countries. I also think culture affects obviously the news a lot. It depends, social media, use of social media in different markets, that's really, really key. Too. I mean, I've read a lot of stuff over the past few months about TikTok. Obviously, that's changed. Apparently, reduced scrolling time on other apps and on search, and you hear all these things. So, but that was particularly popular in specific markets at first. So, yeah, I think it has its way in a lot of different places, really.
Yeah, talking about social media. When I was working in China for this Chinese company and we were doing business in Russia and Spain, it was quite different. We had to target VK and Odnoklassniki in Russia. And in Spain, we wouldn't target social media at all. We would just go to the bloggers that were writing about our topics. Wow. It was so different strategies to take on. And you've been talking about not only SEO in your whole presentation, but you were touching so many different topics of online marketing. I personally would say this is really key to SEO, not to focus on SEO, but to look into all directions, because it belongs to the brand building, and with Google taking the brand into consideration, if your brand is strong in those different target markets, is really key. What do you say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think again, like you can often, I've heard a client say before, like SEOs sit in their SEO dungeon and do their SEO and just kind of think about SEO. And that's because there's so much you can think about. But yeah, definitely. I guess with the example you just said about working the business in China and then looking at, Russia, etc., you cannot really just do keyword research, do a technical audit of a domain, do a link acquisition strategy and be okay with it. That is just, I would rather kind of not talk a client or a prospect out of investing SEO, but I'd rather talk them into looking at the bigger picture as a SEO myself, and then they can make a decision on it if that's right. But I think that's obviously quite resource intensive. The easiest way is just to talk more, just to communicate. I have KPIs for some of my clients who literally get the teams talking, to have quarterly meetings with them, whether that's branding or PR, medium communications, or different channels or whatever it is just to get them talking. And that's where I think as an SEO, because maybe I see us as quite more holistic than some people might, but I think it's in your control, because you're ultimately changing what's on the website, which is being used in every channel. It's being used in every channel. But if your organic strategy is bad and you lose organic performance, you're going to have to fix it. So why would you let, someone on a paid team amend a load of landing pages without talking to them a few months earlier? This is where, I think communication is key in that.
I think this is a really good ending word here for this webinar today. Communication is the key. Definitely. For all the other questions that we did not answer yet, we will all collect them, write them down, prepare a blog post where you and I will answer all those questions. And I think in about 7, maybe 10 days, we will have it online and inform everyone who signed up to this webinar. So please stay tuned, look in your email box, and you will have your questions as well. Answered as well.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chloe.
Great.
Really interesting.
So thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and let's say goodbye to the audience, and hopefully we'll do another webinar again.
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, thank you for listening, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.